This is The Energy Equation. I'm Ollie Patrick, and this is the podcast that helps you understand your health by focusing on one thing, your energy. Because if you've got energy, you can live fully. Today's guest is no stranger to extreme environments. Former Royal Marine Commando turned world record-holding adventurer, Aldo Kane has faced some of the toughest conditions on Earth, from the high seas to active volcanoes. He's here to share what those experiences have taught him about resilience, recovery, and sustaining energy. Welcome, Aldo, to The Energy Equation.
Thank you for having me.
This should be a really fun conversation, I hope.
You say that.
Well, we've got so much data and we want to dive into you and people will have seen you in so many different guises. Mm-hmm. But what we want to understand is, where does all that energy come from? What are you doing to find it and what can we learn from that?
Yep.
But we start all our guests with this crucial first question. We want to get a sense of how you feel. We've got data on your DNA, we've got data on your wearables, but thinking of your energy over the last 6 weeks,
yep,
with 100 being everything you could wish for physically, but also emotionally,
yep,
also cognitively. You know, if you were to average yourself, where are you at from a score point of view?
I would guess somewhere around 75.
Oh, nice. Solid.
That would give me room for improvement. But yeah, I reckon 75. I never feel like totally done in.
That's a good sign. That's our baseline. Done in is what we don't want.
Yeah.
And has it ever been higher? When would that score have been highest?
You know, I genuinely feel pretty good a lot of the time. I've never been aware of it until paying attention to it in the last few years. I generally feel really high energy once I've done a trip.
Yeah.
And I come back and I'm recharging. And a lot of that isn't about the physical stuff for me. It's about making meaning of the trip, what I've done, the expedition, like the mental sort of cognitive part about it, like the purpose part of it.
Yeah.
Actually has a big impact on how I conduct my business day to day.
That's so interesting. And that's almost more so in the post-expedition trip glow, sort of aftermath.
There's a bit of, there's a slump post-expedition, which is, I'm aware of it now, so I know it's not depression setting in the dark clouds, but it's fatigue, it's, you know, a release of, you know, the pressure and stress. And then just shortly after that is like a really good feeling of well-being. Pre-trip, there's a lot of warranted anxiety.
Yeah.
Not anxiety because it's controllable. You know, my job is trying to control risk and control hazards and you know, and there's a lot of unknowns.
Very cool. And actually I want to try and link that skill set maybe back to some of the behaviors you've got, but also one of the other tests we run, which was your DNA. And I think we'll start with your DNA because as a result, you know, you started with your DNA and I'm always interested in whether certain aspects of your genes have influenced the career you followed and the man you've become.
Yeah.
To clarify for those, you know, who've not listened to the show before, we're not testing the scary part of your DNA. We didn't think that would be good fun. We don't want to do the disease forecasting, which is really tricky anyway. We're not doing, you know, where the ancestry part and checking for wanton relatives.
I was a Viking.
And we all are.
Yeah.
You know? So we're not going to do any of that. We're going to do the bit where we're looking at certain parts of your DNA that contribute to your responsiveness to exercise, responsiveness to stress and sleep, responsiveness to nutrition, some around skin, some around detoxification, and just see if there's anything interesting in there that might pertain back to this theme of energy. So it's good DNA, you'll be pleased to know. And I suppose everyone's DNA is good, but it doesn't set what you're going to be. It just gives you some potential opportunities. The first thing I notice within your DNA is you've got several genes that give you a heightened tolerance to stress. Does that feel fair?
I guess if you were to look at my job from the outside, you could sort of deduct it would be quite stressful on me, or I had some way of dealing with it that, you know, at one point I was bouncing from, I think we did like 13 or 14 world first expeditions back to back with like a week off, 2 weeks off, paddling for 6 weeks, then got locked in a nuclear bunker for 10 days on my own for a separate experiment on sleep and you know, or bouncing down to the Ebola sort of pandemic down in West Africa for 3 months. And when I look back at everything I've done, I feel relatively well adjusted.
Yes.
And I'm not sure why that is. I think, me personally, I feel like the more you do, the more you become inoculated to it. But also the more you do, the more you realize that what the thing is very different to what your perception of the thing is. And usually you can't tell the difference until you get on the job. Let's say going to war, like I spent 10 years, in the Marines as a sniper and never having gone to any conflict. Then you go to one and it's very different to what you would imagine it is.
Yes.
And so there's that juxtaposition between the perception and the reality. And the more I've done, I've been operating in extreme remote hostile locations for about 30 years. So the more you do, the more I feel like, well, I don't understand all of this stuff. I'll learn as much as I can, but we don't actually know until we get there.
Yeah.
And then I'm confident that I can deal with most things.
So interesting. I want to come to another gene for that in a second. But is that a sense that I think a lot of people would connect with that? The anticipation of the stress is worse than the stress itself.
100%. Look at, there's any example in everyday life, not just, the first time I went into a volcano, I was fairly anxious before I got there. I remember standing on the top of it and just being terrified.
Yeah.
Like legs shaking, mouth dry, panicking a little bit because I had to then get 10 people inside it. So that is one thing. But the reality, once you get going, doing stuff you know how to do, break it down into smaller chunks. Right? I know I can do this. That builds confidence. I know I can do this. That builds confidence. But you wouldn't ever necessarily know until you're in it.
Yeah.
And I think when I've looked at my life and the things that I've been most worried about beforehand, it's very rarely, if ever, been how I expected it. So all the stuff that I worried about didn't actually manifest itself. And some things happened that would be much worse than what I could have imagined.
Yeah.
But I didn't go there before it. So I've just learned, I have things now that I do that ensure that I don't go down that wormhole.
Very good. I think the sentence, the first time I went down a volcano is a new one to me. How many times have you been down a volcano?
About 7 or 8.
7 or 8. That seems about the right number.
Yeah. They're equally as terrifying each time you do it, but you get a bit more accustomed to it.
Amazing. And actually, lots of what you talked about, previously is the sense of mitigating risk, and when we look back at your DNA again, we look at a gene that's involved in risk taking. In fact, this gene called COMT can define as two main different profile types. There's a warrior type, which are people who really quickly break down dopamine and quite like to leave things to the last minute and then know they'll deal with it when it happens. Mm. Then the flip of that is someone who's called the strategist, where they tend to try and mitigate high stress events by pre-planning.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but which of those two would you connect with more?
Yeah, it's a funny one because I guess what my DNA says could have been changed with the career that I've had. So I think, I often look at this, had I not joined the Marines at a young age,
yeah,
where would I be now? What would I be doing? It's unlikely I would have been doing this type of work. I suppose ego-wise, I'd like to say I'm the warrior, but I have no idea.
Well, warrior sounds better.
Yeah.
But I think in the role, because of your ability to pre-plan, etc., you are a strategist. In fact, you've got both copies of the gene for that. And as you say, you will have learned a huge number of strategies to deal with those acute stresses. But you're, even when we think of your role as a sniper, that pre-operative role in terms of the preparing, the waiting, the all the steps you need to make sure that you're avoiding, in many cases, that unexpected event.
That's interesting because I look back to that and I wonder what it was that, because since I was 12, wanted to be a sniper, not for shooting and that stuff, but just what type of person do you need to be able to move through, let's say, enemy territory on your own with no, in my head at 12, this is what I was thinking, with no backup, it's all on you. What sort of person do you need to become to do that? And that for me was the big driver. It's if you get to that point, Aldo, then you're in some of the top elite performers, out there. But I often wonder if it goes back to potentially my mum's side or whatever, with that that family group is quite stoic. That side is quite stoic, and there was a lot of compartmentalism, and and you need to be able to do that as a sniper, and it's very adaptive, to be like that, because falling apart on the battlefield is not ideal. But I think that strategy was probably adaptive for that job.
Energy is everything, and every week on the Energy Equation, we'll give you the tools to boost yours. Tap follow now and join the community learning how to eat, sleep, and live for more energy. Now, back to the episode. Well, let's move into the you now. So we've got some great genes, but then we put a monitor on you to check what your lifestyle is in the present. So we've measured you over 3 days, actually 4 days you've given us, using a heart rate variability monitor to look at sleep, its quality and its restorative ability, to look at your stress and recovery, and to look at your movement levels and fitness. And I thought we'd start on a really high note, and a genuinely high note. So we're going to score each of these out of 100 based on the software that you've worn. And your sleep scored 98 out of 100.
That is interesting, because we've got a 1-year-old that I'm weaning at the minute, or that my wife and I are weaning, and sleep has been a little bit in tatters. But
there'll be people crying at home listening to that. You've nailed a 98 with a 1-year-old, and if you don't do a book off the back of this, I don't know what.
My wife does a lot. Has done up until this point, but sleep is something that, because I've had it restricted over the years, since I was 16, really, I know that it's a force multiplier when it comes to performance, and also mood. Like if I've not had good sleep, then my mood is down. Everything's coming against me, like the demons are out. And it's better I mix that with drink as well. Then it's I've definitely been in places in my life where I was drinking too much. Because I sort of separated out health and fitness, like in my head, I was always fit. I was former Royal Marine Commando, I'm fit. In my mindset, I've always been fit. But the health part, I never really paid much attention to it, because I just assumed that I was fit and healthy. So my sleep is, I'm aware from expeditions and, from being in the Marines, that when I'm not sleeping, then my performance is down.
Absolutely amazing. And so we'll look at the sleep now. So, on these days, what is interesting is you go into rapid recovery, real high quality recovery almost instantly when you get into the sleep environment. Have you got a really definitive unwinding routine? How do you switch off all the things that you're thinking about in that bedroom?
So my routine is, I rarely watch television, and I'm pretty busy throughout the entire day. So I would say for me, the biggest thing that I do that helps my sleep is that I'm not sat at a desk the whole day. Yeah. So I'm busy, regardless of what it is, So I'm busy. I've got a bias to action. So I'm, it's, I think it was like the sort of 90s adverts about using stairs instead of lifts, but I do that.
And bias to action, such a great phrase. So just elaborate on that.
It just means that I, if there was an escalator and a set of stairs, I take the stairs, or the lift, instead, I would take the stairs instead of the lift. Or, if I've got to get somewhere and it's less than a mile or something, I'll walk. So I'm just continually looking at ways to move through the day. When I'm at home, you probably see from the stats there that, I'm never sat down relaxing, and most of the stuff I'm doing is involving moving, lifting, whatever. So in that respect, being busy physically during the day helps me sleep at night. Times that I've had really bad sleep over my life has been when I'm being desk bound, not outside, not exercising, even just being outside. We at home eat outside 3 times a day in the garden, especially in the summer. Fabulous. Breakfast, lunch, and dinners outside with the kids, and that's really easy to do, and it's free. But I think with sleep, exercise during the day is a big one. I try not to engage in any screens really before bed, not because I'm worried about what the screen's doing to me, but it's more the stuff that I would likely consume if I was sat on the sofa is going to be not healthy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be wishing I was doing something else instead of being Aldo Kane.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's probably people who want to be Aldo Kane instead of doing what they're doing when they're sat scrolling through it. So, exercising and just a bit of control on the screens, which is even more important now we have kids. So we've got a lockbox in the kitchen now. So when we come in, we tell them we're putting the phones in when we pick them up from nursery. We get them out once they go to bed, but it's more like, we're putting this away now, we're spending time with you. So, it's probably a bit of that. I don't really, I've never been one for taking stuff to bed with me and worrying. Even in the hardest times of my life, I've still been able to sleep. That may be a gift from the military.
Yeah.
I can sleep in a chicken's lip.
I've been around sleep a long time, but chicken's lip has never been the analogy of choice. I love it. And that's, I suppose, when you've been in periods of time in the military or on, your cross-Atlantic, expedition or rowing expedition, where you are severely limited in time, what techniques have you used to sort of backfill that energetic loss?
I think it's probably more an understanding, because when I do an expedition or a thing, say you're climbing a big wall and you're on the wall for 10 days, like you never sleep for 8 hours through the night. There could be rockfall or ice, or, you're catching bits as and when you can. So again, on something like that, and then the military, there's a bias to sleep. I have that. So it's, if you're not doing anything, sleep, like get something in.
Yeah.
On the row's an interesting one, because we set off from Portugal and rowed to Venezuela in a rowing boat.
Unbelievable.
The routine is 2 hours on, 2 hours off for the 50 days.
Yeah.
And I naively thought before I left it, that's half the day you could sleep, but it's hot or it's cold. And during the day, my circadian rhythm obviously would not let me sleep. I cannot sleep during the day, even if I'm knackered. I go up and lie down, and one, mentally I'm like, I should be doing something, and two, like I find it hard to switch off during the day, and which I think helps because I keep that sleep pressure or whatever it is, for the evening.
Yep.
So I thought on the row that we would be able to like sleep for 6 hours or whatever, but it turns out, we could only sleep in the dark hours, and you have 2 rotations. So you end up only sleeping max for like probably an hour and a half, rowing again for 2 hours, and then have an hour and a half because it takes time. You got to get in from rowing, you got to get your kit off, sort of your kit out, then get into sleep, and then you're waking up again in an hour and a half and back on the oar. So we'd maybe get an hour and a half sleep, rowing, an hour and a half sleep, and then maybe half an hour. So it was probably like between 3 and 5, I want to say, max in a 24-hour period.
What's interesting, because you've reported in the past, you go to bed a little early, you wake up early, you do your phys, first thing in the morning. When we look at your DNA, you've got a predisposition actually to be more of an owl.
Really?
Yeah. And of course, this is the interesting thing about DNA. It's a potential predisposition. And I suppose the question is whether you were in your early years and then you trained that out of yourself in that sort of...
It's interesting because my wife and I argue about this all the time, because she is creative and an owl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's 8 o'clock. I'm heading to bed. She's like, we never spend time together. I'm like, well, it's bedtime.
On the flip, you mentioned alcohol, and an enjoyment of alcohol. Where have you found your relationship with alcohol and sleep?
Really bad. I suppose I joined at 16. It's a very boozy culture, or it was. There'd be big periods of abstinence, 6 months, you go away in a job, come back, and then sort of, it's probably more binge. So I've definitely partook in a lot of boozing over the years. And I never really associated it with anything sleep-wise, but my sleep is obviously really bad. And like less energy, less likely to train, although I can and did, for years, have a boozy night and then get up and train the next day. But that's what I mean about that dissociation between like fitness and health. I could still run, I could still do all the, the lifting and the hard work, but I was also sort of boozing too much and essentially undermining everything that I was doing.
Here's a 60-second thought. We often think of energy as something we can add, more coffee, better nutrition, another workout. But the truth is, you can't create energy without recovery. And recovery starts with sleep. Sleep is one of the biggest drivers of your energy system. It's when your body restores cells, balances hormones, and resets your nervous system. Without quality sleep, everything from focus to motivation and physical performance starts to dip. That's why Simba have focused on the science of sleep. Using data from over 10 million sleepers, they've engineered mattresses and bedding designed to help you recover properly. Their hybrid mattresses combine AeroCoil springs and Simbatex foam to support your body, keep you cool, and reduce partner movement. Simba have won over 100 sleep awards, including 6 Which Best Buys, and they offer a 200-night trial, a 10-year guarantee, and next-day delivery. Head to simbasleep.com/energy equation to see how Simba can help you power up through better sleep. I've spent years helping people understand what really fuels their energy. And when it comes to daily nutrition, Vitals by Heights is where I start. Most of us still fall short on those key nutrients that support energy, focus, and mood. And that's where Vitals comes in. This is what a modern multivitamin should be. It's advanced, it's absorbable, and it's actually effective. It includes not just the basics, but 20 essential nutrients, including omega-3s and B vitamins, which are vital for brain health and energy metabolism. What sets it apart and why I love it is the science. It's formulated by doctors and dietitians, and it's backed by thousands of studies. It's clinically proven to work. It's built for long-term impact, not just short-term spikes. And as someone who reads the research and feels the results, I believe deeply in this. In fact, I believe in this product so much, I've joined the Heights team as their Chief Energy Officer because I believe they're setting a new standard in supplementation. If you're ready to kickstart your energy journey, start with Vitals. Get 20% off your first month at heights.com/EE or use the code EE20 at checkout.
And, I just sort of recently cut back, in fact, totally stopped.
Wow.
Just for I don't want to be teetotal because I love it. I love the socializing that goes with it. And almost everyone that I know in my groups, would go out and have a drink. But I just wanted to be more mindful about it. So, I've stopped now for probably about 6 weeks coming up. I've noticed since then my sleep is way better. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, I don't actually drink that much, but total abstinence has meant that, that my sleep has massively improved.
Brilliant. And again, as a social tool, there's a strong message there. A lot of our male relationships are built around alcohol as a base, but as a regular thing, it can really challenge that recovery.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. Brilliant. There's lots there on sleep, which is, and again, 98 out of 100.
That's great.
It's a disgrace, really. So we've got to get you back to earth with some more human results.
Yeah.
Next thing we look at is we look at this idea of stress and recovery. And really what we're looking at there is over each 24-hour cycle, how often was your body physiologically alert?
Yep.
And there's a nervous system that prepares you for alertness, would increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, increase temperature. There's a nervous system that prepares you for energy restoration and recovery. And they're slightly counterintuitive to each other.
Yep.
So we're mapping over the 24 hours, just when were you ready for threat and when were you ready for chill and rest and recovery.
Yep.
And here you scored slightly lower, 60 out of 100.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you saw the results coming in on the app. And what you will have seen is in waking hours, you are on.
Yeah.
In sleeping hours, you are off.
Yeah.
Is that just who you've been?
Yeah. I don't fully know how to analyze the results, but when I was looking at it, I was thinking, as long as that's in balance between green and red, first of all, that was my first point, is that do the chunks line up roughly in balance?
Yes.
And then 2, subjectively, was I in actual threat state there, or was I doing something that was physical and new and I was learning? And so the first 2 days I was wearing it, I was on an off-road motorcycle course.
Very cool.
So riding big bikes off-road, all new skills, people I didn't know, off-road terrain, dropping a bike, like doing all that stuff.
Yes.
Learning new skills again. And psychologically not knowing how to do the thing, so I was dealing with all of that stuff and the physical activity. So there was, on those 2 days, there's like in between the red and the blue. So I guess the second point would be subjectively, yes, that says I'm stressed, but was that to me a good stress, or was that like I've got deadlines, I've got emails, and or if I was sat at the computer, and stationary for 8 hours and it was like that, I'd be worried.
I think that's such a great example, that there's a sort of concern over stress, as in I don't want to see too much stress on the graph. I think when we go at the first figures, we want to see, sort of 35% of each 24 hours spent in physiological recovery. So you're getting that. What's interesting, you're getting all of that is coming during your sleeping hours. But when we see this red, which is depicting that your body is ready for threat, that doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because you would want to be engaged and switched on whilst learning that new skill, whilst enabling new relationships and other. And the fact that you're doing it in a physically dynamic, as in physically you are exerting yourself, and that's where we see the blue on the graph, where we see these interspersions of exercise-induced physiological stress. Really, it's a lovely stress picture. What's interesting, those 2 days we would expect that, probably. Yeah. The days then you're at home.
That's interesting.
Would we expect it? But we saw it again.
Yeah.
And what does that reflect?
I'm always on the go, so I'm physically moving and doing stuff. And the second thing is that actually being at home, I've always said this, the easy things in life are actually quite tough and stressful for me. I'm fine to go and abseil off the top of 1,000-meter cliff, or go on a submarine to the seabed, or go diving at night with sharks. That's what I do for a job. Like going around the big flat pack shop on a Sunday, or like bath time with the kids, where you've got all of these things that are out of control and I can't control them, are actually quite stressful. And I don't ever feel stressed in the moment, when I'm doing it, but I'm very aware that, like kids generally, it's nonstop. And I want to be that nonstop dad, but there's, it was interesting looking at that the most stressful times I think that I had was like dinner, bath time, like picking them up from nursery, doing all of that stuff, driving. Yeah. So
there'll be a lot of people at home going, yes.
Yeah.
Like, yes. Because, if Aldo is more stressed, this guy can do these incredible things.
Yeah.
Your physiology. And it's again, we got to almost reframe the word stress into heightened state of alertness.
Yeah.
And this maybe ties back into the gene picture and the fact you've spent your life controlling these risks by pre-planning, by preempting all these different scenarios and reducing the likelihood of encountering stresses.
Yeah.
And suddenly you've got, 2 kids in a bath and all those control mechanisms don't work.
And it's also slightly maladaptive, the risk piece that I've been accustomed to over the years, because my job is to assess something and spot all of the things that could go wrong, hazards, and the likelihood of them happening, the risk of it happening. So that as a job makes me very situationally aware.
Yeah.
So when the kids are standing up on a wobbly table and there's a curb with the sharp bit on, I'm like, that could happen. Right? I'm kind of on, even though I'm off.
You're like the ultimate health and safety executive.
Clipboard and best. Yeah.
But that is it. You're mitigating those future events.
I'm with those guys. I'm mitigating silly things happening so that they can do bonkers, crazy things later. But it's the insidious small things that I don't want to have happen.
Yeah,
they're preventable.
I love that, and I think. But you still need to recover. So sleep is your biggest opportunity. And, there's that great question. If I don't recover at all during the day, but my sleep is awesome, will I get away with it? And the answer is probably. But if your sleep's ever compromised with a night on the booze or other, then you're fragile. Have you tried leaning into sort of daytime recovery techniques? I know you've got a sauna at home.
Yeah.
Where does the sauna or other things tick into this?
Sauna. So I've been playing around with sauna and the cold bath. I noticed the cold does not help. When I was first messing around with it, I used the cold bath and I was awake for like 4 hours after that. I could not go to sleep.
So you're using it in the evening?
I used it. I was. I tried. That didn't work. Sauna does work, but too close to bedtime. Again, I'm too hot and I'm up and I'm bothered and it keeps me awake a little bit. If I time it right, about 7 o'clock, then it has a great effect on my sleep. It feels much deeper, much more fuller.
So the sauna piece is really interesting. So you're doing the sauna at 7. So there's lots of people trying to work out how they pull from this 98 out of 100 sleep score. So, and that's basis that you're going to bed about 9:30.
I'm usually in bed for 9.
Yeah. And then you're asleep pretty quickly
Yeah.
thereafter. And that, sauna itself is another physiological stressor. But what we see after it, and we do see it when you wear the data, is a greater volume of recovery afterwards. In the same way as exercise, what we call hormetic stress. It creates a stress on the basis that the after effect will be greater relaxation.
Yeah.
So we actually see that with your timing. So you've mastered that, and to the dosage.
If I train, interestingly, if I train at night, either CV or lifting, I can't. It trashes my sleep.
And that's again this principle that the core temperature needs to drop by about 1 degree for us to go into this proper sleep cycling. So that's the same: eating too late, screens too late, training too late, saunaing too late. But I love the fact you've got that dosage about right, and that works well. Also really interesting that sleep, is compromised by this cold water immersion where you get an exhilarating impact from it. Did you ever try it in the morning?
I do. Like if I've got a day where I know I'm not training, and I need to be at the house early doors, then I'll use it then, because it doesn't really impact on my training. So I'm trying to there's so much information out there, I'm just finding my way with it. But I don't use it for anything other than it's just quite difficult and uncomfortable.
There'll be lots of people going, that seems like the exact reason not to do it. So what's your logic of doing something difficult and uncomfortable?
Same as the cold shower. So every shower I have, at the end of it, I turn it on cold for a minute. I don't think I've ever talked about it, but it's not for any other reason other than it's difficult. In the shower's harder than the ice bath, because you have to physically do it, and then you have to use warm, and it's just uncomfortable. And I'm fairly certain there's probably no scientific benefit to it, but for me to do it mentally, I'm like, I've done a hard thing now, so that's it.
Do you think people on general are missing that ability to endure the hard thing?
I think we live in quite a comfortable world. Last year I spent 130 odd nights sleeping out, whether it's in the jungle or desert or up in the mountains, on the series we just filmed. And being outside is not, you don't have all the comforts that you have at home, and it's it's quite uncomfortable. But I'm not a scientist or a psychologist, so I can't pass sort of any judgment on it. I just know that me personally, when I've done Foxy and I just did and Woody and Carl did a 500-kilometer race around the Arctic. And Anna said when I came home from that, I was the most chilled that she's ever seen me. And I think, if I was to break that down, why, it would be because I was content in that I was current in doing hard things, if that makes sense. So I'll have gone and done a hard thing. I'll have spent my entire 10 days being at 50-50 whether I was going to finish it. So it was ambiguous. And uncertain, and then overcoming that, achieving it, and then coming home and sort of relaxing. So in a way, the cold shower is a little bit of that. That's you can just chuck in there at any point.
I'm here with drifting into grit, and that ability of grit as a muscle. That you have these extraordinary, challenges that you must persevere, and that perseverance proves to you that you're capable of persevering, which makes everything easier. Mm-hmm. So it's almost you're using that cold as a mini grit. Sort of keeping that muscle worked over. Yeah,
and for me, I talked about that sort of bias to action that I have, but a bias to do the hard thing, for me is also the case. If there's something easy to do, then I'm just talking about everyday life. Lifting something or moving something or doing the housework, hoovering. I'll just go and do the thing. I never question it. If there's a hard thing that needs to be doing, then I'll go and do it. And I think you get, I suppose, if you look at survival situations and expeditions, the worst thing that can happen to you is that you lose control, or even worse, you have a perception that you're losing control. Getting to the top of the volcano, feeling out my depth out of control, but then doing one thing that I can do and then the next thing. So by doing these little nuggets of hard things daily, you sort of, I guess you just build up a confidence in coping.
one thing, I know the days of being a sniper were way back, but I think one thing you have referenced before there, and it ties into recovery, was breathing.
Yeah.
In fact, the breathing and of course the ability to control a sniper rifle is quite aligned. Is there anything you learnt from those days of being a sniper that you transfer to your ability to recover in the present?
I suppose one of the big things I've got is that even when everything is chaos roundabout, I can always seem to compartmentalize it and shut it off, which allows me to deal with my own state, how I'm feeling, anxious, nervous. Like half the time I just need to go and train.
Yeah.
My wife will say, just go to the gym. Like, you're being irritating, or like you've done this thing 5 times, just go to the gym. But I think, with the sniper stuff, actually, when you're behind a rifle, it never crossed my mind until sort of fairly recently, is that, your breathing is everything, because the way that the bullet exits the rifle is directly impacted by how and when and the pattern of your breathing. And you can affect the bullet as it's going out due to your breathing. So you spend a lot of time shooting on the range, controlling your breathing. And I always found it very relaxing, which sounds weird because, you're firing a big, heavy, loud sniper rifle, but very relaxed and very zen. And it obviously is, you're regulating your nervous system through the breathing piece. But if I'm in a situation that's really tricky, then that is the first thing that I do, because I'm no different to anyone else. People look at the stuff we do, but we could take anyone and go and do a hard thing. Yeah. It's just people don't necessarily get the opportunity to do it, and I'm lucky that I get the opportunity to do these things.
Brilliant. I've got to move to fitness, which has been a big piece, but I think that recovery bit is so much in there.
Yeah.
So we look at, again, volume of movement, quality of movement, and we sort of score this. And we also had you do a dynamic walk to capture a marker of cardiorespiratory fitness called VO2 max, which you have had tested before. And he scored 53 out of 100.
Is that good? Out of 100. Oh, yeah. So room for improvement.
You tell me whether it's good. No, but and we'll come to the VO2 max score separately. So it's probably, you got a bit stitched up here by the motorbike couple of days, which were sort of low level activity, but weren't really classifying as physical activity.
I didn't train on either of the days, and although you're on the bike and throwing it around a little bit, I probably did hardly any steps then. Yeah, and was so physically knackered at the end of it, I didn't go for a run or do anything.
And that's that piece again, that cognitive exhaustion just play out into a lack of physical desire. And then we had the days at home, we had sort of one quality exercise session. So you've been a bit penalised by the fact and we need to preempt our guests. We need to go on a 4-day training camp, sleep like a dream, breathe and meditate. But we've seen you talk about your physical activity as a sort of bedrock. Interestingly, when we look at your DNA, you have a slightly slower than ideal recovery capability. So we look at when you do, exercise, you create damage and that creates inflammation. And some of your genes are slower than others to turn that inflammation off. So you might be, if we had a room of 100 people, you might expect more muscle soreness, more of that delayed onset muscle soreness. Is that ever played out in reality?
I don't think that I would have noticed it, but I've been getting my blood tested every 6 months so that I can be more aware of my health.
Love it.
And probably for about 3 years now. And my inflammation markers are always higher than they should be. So, that's potentially what that is.
Could be. And inflammation is a vital, beneficial process. Lots of people are terrified of everything, but, everything has a purpose in the body. So inflammation is a low-level immune response. We need inflammation to take the exercise damage and turn it into new muscle tissue, new blood vessels. But that ability to turn it off, is of interest. And I think, we're all trying to personalize our dosage of exercise. Yeah. You've generally been a 5 days a week guy. Is that routine
pretty much? It's, I'll train 5 days a week, Monday to Friday, and then I won't do anything really on the weekend. When I say training, I'm talking about lifting. Yeah. And then I won't do anything in the weekend, but I'll be out mountain biking or whatever. doing the thing. And then CV, running and bike. That's pretty much so. Like, I'll train through the week. I just see it as work.
We often track our steps, our sleep, our screen time when we're looking at our health, but we almost never check what's going on inside our body. And that's what got me hooked on Stride One. It's not just another health test. It's a full system. It's DNA, it's gut microbiome, it's blood biomarkers, all connected to one platform. Because far too often, we test a marker and maybe we make some changes, but we don't come back to retest to see what worked. And even if we did retest, we might be missing key other markers that interact by not looking at the whole picture across bloods, DNA, and gut health. For me and many of my clients, Stride One gives answers I'd never seen before. You even get a biological age from real blood data, and you can see how that age changes over time. Every 6 months, they retest you. You speak to a dedicated health expert for a full consultation every 3 months, and they actually explain what's going on, not just drop data on you. It's proactive, personalized, and became a core part of how I understand my energy and manage my life. And if you want to run the exact same tests that we use on our guests, you can do that by heading to getstride.com/energy, or just check the link in the description.
So I do it through the week, and I've never been a person that's been like, oh, I love the gym. I'm not a gym bunny in any way, but the stuff that I do is I enjoy it much more because I'm fit. So like to go and spend 2 months in Greenland doing an expedition, then I use my fitness for that. So I've never been bothered by, like getting loads of gains in the gym and then going away and losing it and then coming back and having to start again, because that's why I train.
Yes.
I train to go and do the thing. And if the atrophy that happens in all my body because of that expedition, that's fine. I come back and then I rebuild it.
Love that. And atrophy, that sort of predominantly loss of muscle mass in between. And which was the most physically demanding challenge you ever faced?
The thing that we did up in the Arctic in March was incredibly difficult. It was sort of 19 hours a day moving, probably between 2 and 4 hours sleep in a 24-hour cycle, broken. But I think it's a funny one because it's one of the hardest things that I've ever done. And there was zero risk there because you can just stop and then get picked up and put in a hotel.
Yeah.
But it was hard because the physical act wasn't enough to get me into a state of focus. Yeah. So if I'm on a big wall or doing a 5-hour rebreather dive, or I'm in the jungle with a load of narcos making a load of gear, you're filming them. Yeah.
Very important clarification.
Yeah. You're kind of in a zone. You're focused, and time goes by. Like days and weeks can go by when you're fully like, when you're tracking animals, for example, the whole day can go by and you've not eaten. You're in that zone, but the physical act of walking isn't difficult. So even though we were doing it for 19, 20 hours a day, the act wasn't difficult, which meant the mind wandering was like off the charts. And that I found more debilitating than anything that I've ever done before physically. Because normally I'm doing a hard job in a slightly worrying situation where you're focused in everything. Like on a big wall, gravity works 100% of the time. Yeah. So everything you do requires focus. Whereas just walking doesn't. And you go into this mind wandering sort of thing. But that actually physically knackered me. It broke me. I damaged my Achilles, obviously not sleeping. Psychological stress of it was quite high. There's a lot of self-induced pressure. We sort of gobbed off about it on social media that we're going to do it, and then we're dealing with the fact that we want to tap out, and how do we do it without people thinking we're whatever. And then I came back and thought I could get straight back into lifting, and protruded a disc in my back just because I was like, it's stupid when I look back, but I had 10 days of zero sleep, like hardly any, physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, and then tried to go and deadlift and put my back out.
So, and there's so many lessons in there. I think personally that psychological stress goes in the same pot as physical stress.
Yeah.
So the behavior itself wasn't as demanding, but when you add in the sheer complexities of your mind wandering to 1,000 places, that is collectively
Yeah.
exhausting. Laid on, zero, very little sleep.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a thing. And again, even those people who are highly conditioned, we all need rest and recovery. And have you built that in now that for the next expedition coming back, you'll be a little kinder to yourself in that sort of transition phase?
I have. I've spent time in the last 5 years making sure that the transitions are smoother, because I was essentially doing really hard things back to back, belt fed for years.
Yeah.
And I was just getting a bit complacent. And, I wasn't getting burnt out doing it by any stretch, but I was not paying attention when I was there.
Yeah.
Doing these amazing things that no one's ever done before and seen. And then I'm already thinking and planning 2 expeditions down the line, what kit I need and where I need to be. And I got to the end of like 2 years of doing that and was like, I have no idea where that time went. And I had no clear shutdown from the expedition. So I wasn't dealing with anything. So I sort of, in the last 5 years, I've been more careful about how I reintegrate, especially now that I've got kids. I can't come back, being Aldo Kane expedition leader and talk to my wife that way, or, like in that zone, that doesn't go down well. So, I just have a process. It's all pretty simple, but it's like a shutdown routine from that exped, all the planning and prep, and you're busy and you get out there, and then oftentimes, you finish, you make your way back out, and then you come home and then you're sat in the house with your family and you've just done this mega thing. And so I have this kind of shutdown routine now where I, usually you come out, it's on a little boat or a little plane and then onto a bigger thing, and you're working your way up to your landing at Heathrow. But I sort of go through all my photos and videos, process all that, because more often than not, you're sort of moving on to the next thing. So I sort of process all of that as I go on the way back. And then I've talked about it before, but my routine when I get back in is to, do the washing all from the expedition and then hoover the house from top to bottom. And that's like a little circuit breaker. I think Andy calls it a circuit breaker, but essentially it's like a thing that switches me from being Aldo Kane expedition leader to Aldo Kane dad. And anyway, the more that I've been doing that, the smoother the integration is, and not as chaotic, because I would just come home, just be a mess, tired, wrung out, but try to go full bore into everything else. So I definitely now factor in recovery time. Even meetings, I just don't take them for the first 2 or 3 days when I come back. So I'm need to just get back.
Absolutely brilliant. I think when we look at a lot of people, they need that circuit breaker from just their day at work.
Yeah.
And when people started working from home, they weren't having this transition, and be that a fairly mundane task, hoovering or a shower and a change of clothes.
Yeah.
You're just got a much more intense, longer block of work, but we all need those transitions that say, this is this version of me now. So
and I've never really been too good at being aware of the recovery piece. I've been charging hard I'm 47, so I joined up 31 years ago.
Yeah.
So I've been charging hard and having a chaotic life at home and on the job. And, probably about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I was like, I can't have chaos in both parts. My work life is chaotic, but my home life cannot be chaotic. So I made an active sort of decision to declutter, de-chaos my personal life, because something would have given. And I either have the chaos home life and a very stable job, or the opposite way around.
Brilliant. You did a VO2 max test.
Yep.
So VO2 max you've done before. So it's the objective measurement of cardiorespiratory fitness, what people might call cardiovascular fitness or endurance capacity. You actually did a full lab test at a university, I think 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Or was it last year? And this is looking at how much oxygen your body can consume per kilogram in a minute. And we would love a number above 40 milliliters per kilogram. That's what we always tell to our guests. Great endurance athletes are going to be up into the 50s and above. And of course, if you're a Tour de France cyclist or you're built for that, you
off the scale.
You can get up higher. Highest recorded is 97. Yeah, cross-country skier who tends to have the highest numbers. But really, we're that's people whose full-time job is to be an endurance athlete. So when you did the lab test, I think 18 months ago with the gas mask on and cycled yourself to exhaustion, you got 48 milliliters per kilogram. I've measured you today at 47.3 milliliters per kilogram.
Dropping.
Wow, it's dropped 0.8.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good result. You know, and again, you're when we look back at your DNA, interestingly, you weren't designed to be an extraordinary power athlete nor an endurance athlete. You were designed to have a blend of both. So you've got a really nice fusion between adaptability to resistance training and cardio. But that level is probably what is afforded by your training being predominantly weight training.
Yeah.
Do you do sort of hard, deliberately overwhelming cardiovascular exercise?
I only started really probably about a year and a half ago trying to do one specific. So I just did it on, I can't remember what day. So I'll like cycle for 45 minutes, just normal cycle on the bike, and then I'll do intervals at the end of it.
Okay, really interesting.
Because I was aware that, you know, that I wasn't actually, you know, in my head, I'm like, well, I'm fit, I do all these things, but I wasn't ever, you know, I'd go for a run 2 or 3 times a week, but, you know, I've never ran with zones or, you know, heart rate monitors.
State.
I just go for a run because it clears my head and I feel good after it.
Yeah.
You know, I am aware that drops off quite rapidly, and you know, that's the thing. A lot of the kick that I'm doing now, I'm glad that I joined the Marines early and I had that basis. I didn't take any of that seriously until I started having kids, and then the realization that if I want to be going into Everest Base Camp with Atlas on his 16th birthday, like at 61 or 60, like I need to have this amount of fitness now. So I'm really, you know, I left it later to have kids, 42 and 46. But I'm really glad that I did, because it's changed it's changed the narrative in who I am fitness and health wise. Not at all, in fact, risk wise or anything work wise, but for the, like, I want to be around a lot longer.
I love it. And actually that result, it could have dipped down and be rising back up. So we haven't got a close trend. But from 40, it's trying to drop 10% per decade. When you get past 50, it's going to try and drop 15% per decade. So what we're often interested in is, you know, this is a great value. Yes, if we got it to 50, you might see some performance benefits. You might see some energy benefits. You might see some improvements. But at that level, it's a good lifelong level, certainly above, you know, average, you know, nearly into the sort of the good categories. The reality with that is if you want it to stay or rise, you're going to need to overwhelm that cardiovascular system in the way that you've just identified.
Like interval training?
The danger of your sort of steady state, and you picked it out there brilliantly. Lots of people use cardio for psychological well-being. It's the clearing of the fog, it's the management of the mood. But if you don't do something in those higher ends of your capability, you know, if you don't ever go to 100% of your capacity, you can't complain when your body reduces it to 95%.
So if you don't use it, you lose it, basically.
It's the same, you know, and you've got that principle with your resistance training, and that strength has been a key component. And the body, if it's given something it can't quite do at any age and stage, it will adapt to that new capability.
How often should you be doing that where you're training your VO2 max or training that cardiovascular system?
Good question. Depends if you've got dodgy genes for recovery, Aldo. And that dosage would depend on where it sits amongst other training. But certainly one session per week where we have these definitive, and intervals are a way of taking the body to those extreme, you know, capacities in bursts. We've spoken previously on the pod about something called the Norwegian protocol, which is where I do as hard as I can do from a cardio point of view for 4 minutes. And then I recover for the next 3 minutes to the level that allows me to go hard again on the next 4. So I do 4 sets of that.
4 sets of hard work with
4 sets of 4 with 3 in between. But the 4 is not as hard as I can go. The 4 is as hard as I can go for 4 minutes.
For 4 minutes. So
the last minute is hell. But the first 3 are okay. You know, and that's an example of an evidence-based protocol that tells your cardiorespiratory system, I would like you to have a little bit more.
More, please.
Yeah, more, please. And the dose, and that would normally be offset then against lots of the low intensity steady state work. What we tend to find with a lot of people who do the sort of the brain clearing, you know, running, which would fit with me, is you're in the sort of gray zone, what we would call zones sort of 3, where you're not quite in the zone 2, where you get the real stress relieving, you know, building new blood vessels zone, nor you're in the zones 4 and 5. It's still really, really good for you. It still burns calories, still helps sleep, does all those things. But if we polarize the training a little bit more, we tend to see a better result.
But that to me is interesting because you're being very specific about like how many minutes is that? 8, 12, like 26, 7 minutes, something like
First
that.
to work it out.
Yeah. No pressure. But like that to me is good because, when you're running around and you're like, I don't have time to, like 27 minutes, you could get on and goose yourself once a week and you get the gains from that, then
it's well worth it.
Yeah.
It's well worth it. And I think, again, when you're busy with life, with children's responsibilities, this isn't your hobby per se. You said earlier, you don't train because you love it. You train because it's part of your DNA. So it's always that case of, well, could we get a little more bang for our buck? And if you did that session as one of your definitive sessions per week, would we see, if you kept everything else stable, a VO2 max that's rising? Probably. And that's the beauty of why you do your bloods every 6 months. It's why we like data, because we can correct the strategy if it's not working. See the trend. But the baseline result is great. And the only reason you haven't scored higher is just we got too little of your normal routine in there. But you learned how to ride an off-road bike. When you already know how to ride a bike, so it must have been pretty intense this course.
It's great,
Yeah, brilliant. So we've got your worst area of the three is still a great area, and probably your bedrock area. But I think across those three areas, this exceptional sleep and trained ability to prioritize sleep, get away into deep recovery quickly, your ability to recover compromised potentially through your risk management approach, but with key skills like saunaing, breath work, cold. I see great validity to that being solid.
What's the number one thing that you can do during the day that would then put a green spike in there?
Good question. Breathing will always do it. Yep. So if you deliberately focused on slow breathing, nasal breathing, extended exhalation, so we're breathing out longer than we're breathing in. Some of that sort of slight breath holding techniques like the box breathing, I breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4, or I breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8, extended exhalation. Those will immediately turn someone green, which means we've put them into physiological recovery.
That's interesting.
Because the respiratory system is directly attached to the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, that tells me whether I'm calm or alert.
Because I think that's the thing when I'm at home or when I'm busy, like I'm always moving on to the next, physically moving on to the next thing, doing the next thing. I very rarely ever sit down and be like, just have 5 minutes.
And 5 would be great. 5 would be great. And we see 3 blocks of 3 minutes, we see quite significant impact. The other thing that you've naturally gravitated towards, we get a huge restorative benefit from interfacing with nature.
Yes.
We've spoken on this a lot about biophilia and humans' innate connection with nature. So the color green puts our physiology green. The horizon of being out in nature puts us into green. We are designed to feel calmer in those open spaces. So if you combine social connection, as in being with the boys and the family, with breathing in nature, you'll be so green. And really in there, you'll be further restoring your battery. But that's much more pressing for someone who isn't getting the volume of sleep recovery you're getting and needs that recovery in the day. But I think if we were taking 2 things from me that would be relevant, would be, can we get a bit of daytime recovery in there? That would be valid. And as boring and unsexy as it is, can you wear SPF 50?
Yes. I do take note of that now, mainly since having the boys where I'm putting it on them, and I'm like, I may as well put some on me.
Yeah, and I think that's a lovely approach. And out of all the things we've discussed, has anything been particularly interesting or relevant or useful?
I think visually seeing the graph of my day has been interesting, because I did, when I saw it, think, actually, if that's stress, I do need to do something, an intervention in the day that just puts even 1 or 2 green lines in there. But then also my subjective feelings about that is like, I didn't feel at any point stressed there. It would have been interesting to see going through like a really stressful period of time, or like when I'm on the job, like what that's like. Because on the job, I'll have probably all red through the day, and then red and green sleep, like broken sleep. And
you're 100%. And again, that those periods come at an energetic cost that you need to restore from, but they also provide a purpose-led energy that compensates for that. And when we look at physical energy, we're only getting one part of the picture. So all the other things you get from that fulfillment of purpose will backfill that lack of sleep or that heightened vigilance during the night when you're keeping an eye on parameters.
And also, I need to up my VO2 max.
You don't need to, but you might like
I want to.
I know you want.
Yeah.
I need one in a minute.
When you get these little things, I need to start recording it.
I will guide you in. So we smash all your scores together. You get an overall score, which again has been tainted by your motorbike course, but it's a very respectable, excellent, reflective 70 out of 100.
Excellent.
I think, again, you're doing so many brilliant things around technology interface, around leading a life of taking action, developing grit, prioritizing sleep, physical activity based, as the crux of your behaviors. So from my point of view, Aldo, it's been a total joy to see the behaviors, see the man behind them. And thanks so much for coming on the Energy Equation.
Thank you for having me. Room for improvement.
That's the score. So Aldo, you scored an outstanding 70 out of 100, which is brilliant. So on the leaderboard, that actually ties you with broadcaster and author Louise Minchin, who's an age group GB triathlete. So we're kicking with some serious results here. I'm going to put you above Louise because I think we just stitched you up a bit. Just going to move all those down with the idea that you didn't get to do your normal exercise routine, and we know we would have scored higher if we'd had your training, but very respectable 70. Are you happy with your position on the leaderboard?
Yeah, sorry, Louise.
Sorry, Louise. Lots of people below you. And if we get that VO2 max up,
room for improvement,
and a bit of daytime recovery,
you
could be the leaderboard king.
Wicked.
Good stuff. Well done, sir.
Thank you.
Really good.
Cheers.
Really good.